Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and a few of you have been asking me what it's like to use a PC monitor with a next-gen console. Obviously this is the Xbox Series X which I have here. I probably shouldn't really be moving it while it's running, but it's connected to this 4K high refresh rate LG monitor, and yeah, as you can see, it works. But if you are thinking about using your PC monitor with a next-gen console, or maybe even buying a new one instead of using a TV, well, there's a few things to think about. And if you're interested, I'll put some of my recommended and favorite monitors in the description below. Now to test this, I've just got my hands on some next-gen games to try out, including the gorgeous Dirt 5, which can actually run up to 120 FPS. Now you may be thinking, why use a monitor instead of a TV? But there are a few advantages. Monitors can be better for console gaming than cheaper TVs, as they have faster refresh rates and input lag, and as they tend to be smaller, it makes them a good choice for tighter spaces. On the other hand, new TVs tend to have higher 4K resolutions for less money, much better HDR performance, and of course usually come in bigger screen sizes. So let's say you're looking to buy the dream monitor to accompany your shiny new console, one that can take advantage of 4K at 120, variable refresh rates or VRR, decent high dynamic range, and of course good response times. Well, right now your choices are limited to, well, zero. There aren't any. In fact, even newer models like this, which has a 4K 144Hz panel, can't hit 4K 120 on the new consoles. And it's all down to one missing feature, HDMI 2.1. This is kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to next-gen console gaming on a monitor, so let's get it out of the way first. HDMI 2.1 offers the much higher bandwidth that's needed for 4K at 120 or 8K at 60, as well as variable refresh rates and auto low latency modes. And all new next-gen consoles are using HDMI 2.1, as do some higher-end TVs right now. The problem is, most PC monitors tend to favor DisplayPort, with the widespread DP 1.4 standard already offering 4K at up to 144Hz, meaning so far HDMI 2.1 hasn't been as important for monitor manufacturers, and so it's been left out in favor of older, cheaper HDMI 2 ports. Now the good news is that HDMI 2.1 monitors are coming, with the first out of the gate looking to be ASUS's ROG 27, 32 and 43-inch monitors, which are due for release around the end of the year. Acer has a 28-inch with 2.1 coming in January, and then there's the crowd-funded EVE Spectrum 27-inch monitor. What is pretty much certain though is that they'll be very expensive, and I'm not expecting to see many more options before we're well into 2021. So if you really want that dream monitor to go with one of these guys, then, well, you're just going to have to wait for the technology to catch up. But bear in mind that even when these 2.1 monitors come out, they will be very, very expensive. Even this 4K 144Hz monitor without 2.1 costs about £750 or $800. And actually, there's an argument to be made that you can have a really good experience with a 1080p, 1440p or 4K HDMI 2 monitor right now, which of course will be much more affordable. To start with, while 4K at 120 or 8K 60 is of course the ideal, many Xbox Series X and PS5 games are likely to target 4K at 60. And so I'm guessing most 120 FPS modes will be saved for multiplayer or just less graphically intensive games. Secondly, I can confirm that with the Series X at least, you can play at 120 FPS using 1440p or 1080p resolutions, which work fine over HDMI 2.0. Fingers crossed the PS5 will have this option as well, although older HDMI 1.4 monitors will only go up to 60. So taking Dirt 5 on the Series X as an example, this targets 4K 60, but it does have an optional 120 FPS mode, which if running at up to 1440p means either will work over existing HDMI 2.0 connections. As for Gears Tactics, well on the Series X it runs at a native 4K 60. And actually I think even more exciting is the fact that Gears 5 has just been updated for 4K HDR with variable refresh rate support and, as I say, 120 FPS in the multiplayer versus mode.
Excellent work.
Although obviously as we get nearer to the launch, we'll get a better idea of just how many titles support high refresh rates. So you can see here, I've got the 4K UHD resolution, refresh rate at 60, but if I change that to 120, it then will tell me, no, go away, you can't have that, and it will actually drop me down to 1440p at 120. You also could then switch it to 1080p or even 720 if you wanted. But right now with 2.0 monitors, that's the best you're going to get, or 4K 60 of course. So really, rather than having to wait for super expensive new monitors, given the size of these anyway, why not just go for a 1080p or 1440p 120 or I don't know, 144 Hz is more likely monitor, which is a lot more affordable and will still give you a really good experience. 1440p would also be a good match for the upcoming Xbox Series S, which targets 1440 rather than native 4K. If you're looking at smaller 24-inch monitors, maybe you already have one, then 1080p is still fine, although at this point you are losing out a lot on image quality. Like with TVs though, generally speaking, the larger the display, the more immersive and enjoyable the experience is going to be. So going from a 24 to a 27-inch monitor makes a big difference. And it's the same jumping up to 30 or 32. Although then bear in mind that if you are sticking with 1440p, the bigger the screen is, the lower the PPI, and therefore it'll look less sharp. Also, I wouldn't really bother with 21:9 ultrawides if you're just using it for the console. The PS5 and the Xbox only support 16:9, so you'll end up with big black bars either side or a stretched image. Now when it comes to the panel type of the monitor, really, well, I'm not doing very well there, really you should go with either IPS or VA. Of course you do have TN options, which generally are cheaper, and in the past at least they've always been the best for response time, but IPS and VA have caught up so much now that, you know, when it comes to console gaming at least, it's absolutely fine, and they have the benefits of better color accuracy and also better viewing angles. Now the thing is, it's not all about resolution, because of course these next-gen consoles also offer HDR in compatible games. I'm sure you know all about HDR by now, but it can make a big difference, adding in extra detail in the brightest and darkest areas of a scene. How effective this is largely comes down to how bright your monitor can get. The Series X also offers something called Auto HDR, which uses Microsoft's machine learning to add a layer of HDR to games that weren't designed for standard dynamic range. I've tested this on some backwards compatible games and it seems to work pretty well. Most monitors will top out at about 400 or maybe even 500 nits, but it's nothing like the 700, 800 or 1000 that you get on a good TV these days. So that is something worth bearing in mind. I mean, even this guy here supports a display HDR 400 standard, which is fine, it's decent. That means it can sort of guarantee 400 nits of high dynamic range, but really you're going to want to look for a monitor that supports display HDR 600 or even 800. So unless you're willing to spend a ton of money on a very high-end, probably pro level monitor, it's just a compromise you're going to have to make using a PC monitor. And finally, moving on to sound, while TVs usually come with speakers, monitors most often don't, so it's worth checking when you're buying if you think you'll need them. Although they tend to be pretty poor quality, so you'll probably want to have a decent set of headphones to get the most out of the PS5's 3D audio tech and Dolby Atmos on the Xbox. Now I will definitely revisit this video when there are actually some HDMI 2.1 monitors out there for me to test, and I'll of course update you then, and also hopefully we'll have some more next-gen games I can show you, and maybe even some 4K 120 next-gen games, which would be nice to see. But in the meantime, if you're buying at the high end for a PS5 or Series X, dropping the best part of $1,000 on a 4K 144Hz monitor, and only being able to use it at 120Hz with 1440p due to HDMI limitations, means it's just not worth it. If you're not too concerned about high refresh though, then a good 4K 60Hz IPS screen will mean you get the full image quality the new consoles have to offer, and there's loads of options to choose right now. But for most people whose budgets are more around 1080p or 1440p level, or perhaps if you're looking to pick up the Series S, then you really don't need to wait, as those full HDMI 2.1 monitors will likely be out of your budget anyway. And as I say, I still think most AAA games will be targeting 4K 60, so I just don't know, at least in the near future, how important 4K 120 really is. Alternatively, which I know slightly defeats the point of this video, buy a TV, and actually the LG C10 48-inch OLED is actually a really good option and just about maybe right at the top end of PC level size monitors. It is a TV, but I think it's the smallest OLED you can buy. But I think if you do want a big next-gen experience with HDMI 2.1, really a TV is your best way forward. And if you want a smaller one, then I think, as I say, the 48-inch LG C10, which costs about £1,500, is probably your best bet. But what do you think? Do you play your console on a PC monitor? And if so, are you going to stick with the one you have, or are you thinking about buying a new one for the next-gen consoles? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and if you do want to see more Xbox and PC hardware videos, then don't forget to hit that little subscribe button below, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chap.
Oh, tell me again why you got me out of my perfectly good bed for this?